Okay, my name is Ron. My name is Ron. I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to welcome you all here. A couple announcements before we get started. Next week is our anniversary. We have a Big Book workshop here. It will start at 10 a.m. and it'll run to 4 p.m. Peter M's coming up from Florida with Marion W. It's open, it's free, and it'll take place here. What else is going on is that we have a 7 p.m. Al-Anon speaker that if you haven't had the luxury of hearing one, she's very, very good. She spoke at the Liberty Bell Roundup last year, Sue L. So that'll be at 7 p.m. and then Peter will be speaking again at 8:30 p.m. Saturday night. So the workshop is totally different than the night speaking. We'll be on the Big Book of the 12 Steps. It's a good thing. I love doing that. He's a very spiritual guy. He sets the spiritual bar very high. And I always enjoy being around people like that. I hope you guys will enjoy it too. Zach's going to come up here. He's going to chair this meeting. In the back there, we have flyers for just about everything that we got going on, and plus other people. If you have flyers, please bring them here, put them on our table. We like to keep everybody informed. We also have a Facebook page, Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. Things going on up and down the East Coast. It's really, really informative and keeps everybody connected. And if you get bored in AA and you don't have nothing to do, go on there. There's always something to do. We have like 100 speakers that you can download and listen to on your phone. So it just goes on and on and on. We have a website. You can Google it, Saturday night, 1-hour speaker meeting, Doylestown, PA, 8:30, and you'll find that. It gives us all the speakers we have listed for like the next 6-9 months. We've got some great speakers, including Brian for tonight. And I talked to him, and somebody asked me, is he a good speaker? And I said, listen, if you do not like him, start throwing $100 bills and he gets a lot better. So here comes Zach.
Welcome to the Conscious Contact Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Zach and I am an alcoholic. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church at 301 North Main Street at 8:30 p.m. in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. The purpose of the group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teachings of the 12 Steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Gino, welcome.
I'm Dustin.
Hey, Dustin. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Danielle. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Danielle.
Hey guys, I'm Nick. I'm grateful for recovery alcoholic.
Hey, Nick.
An alcohol patient that lives in Florida.
Go ahead, sir.
Cirilio, alcoholic, first time to meet you.
Hey, Cirilio.
Tom, an alcoholic.
Hey, Tom.
And Brian, alcoholic.
Hey, Brian. Anyone else? Welcome, everybody. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 Steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Excellent. Awesome. Are there any announcements besides the ones that Ron made for the good of AA? Dave?
My name is David. I'm an alcoholic. Came to Believe is having a 12th anniversary meeting. It's at Pebble Hill Church off of Edison Furlong in Doylestown. It's this Tuesday, April 18th. Food Fellowship, 6:30, speaker 7:30. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Anyone else? All right. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any other home group member after the meeting if you're interested. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact will provide you one free of charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the back table there that's marked Big Book and CD donations. And if you'd like a CD of any speaker, past or present, see me or Ron before or after the meeting. They're available free of charge. And I've asked Joel to come up and read the preamble.
Hey, my name is Joel. I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. I've asked Sanjay to come up and read the 12 steps of recovery.
Thanks, Sharon.
Hi, my name is Sanjay. I'm an alcoholic. So yeah, these are the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Step 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Thanks.
Thanks, Sanjay. All right, guys, we do have a 7th tradition here. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, the baskets, can you grab that one? Are going to be going around on either side. We have no dues or fees, but we do have expenses: coffee, cream, donuts, rent, big books, CDs, and of course Tim's Ham Sliders. And please don't forget that there's absolutely no smoking on church property. Please go across the street out there, over to Dairy Queen, just not on the church property. And also, please take a minute to take out your cell phones, turn them off, turn them on silent. And now it is my privilege to introduce our speaker for tonight. His name is Brian D., coming to us from the Stepping Stones group of Los Angeles, California. Please help me welcome Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian. I'm an alcoholic. Hey, Brian. And I am really, really happy to be here tonight. Thank you, Ron. Ron went out of his way to get me here. He insisted I fly on United. He didn't tell me which one. Of course, I was one seat behind the guy. But then the cheerleaders that met me at the airport that said, Ron. Not just kidding. Anyway, I grew up in Bucks County, so this is, in a weird way, kind of a homecoming of sorts. It's also great to see my friend Jim, who I know from New York. My vital statistics are, my first day of sobriety in AA was November 19th, 1988. Oh, okay. Thanks, Ron. So I've been sober for a while. It is truly a one day at a time business. I didn't have that sense of timing in my thinking at all. How I got here was that I drank too much. I didn't think very clearly, and I didn't behave very well. And Now, I did some things that stayed ahead of that, but after a while, those things really started to make a difference in terms of bringing me down. Like I say, I grew up down by Yardley there, and I had a really very average growing up childhood years. There was a good deal of drinking in the house. My dad was in the liquor business. He, believe it or not, his job in the liquor business was, they called him a missionary, because he went around and explained to wholesalers how different boozes were made, you know. And he used to put my sister and I through these slideshows that were horrible, and we all use purified water, distilled water makes it flat and all this, man. So, but the thing about the drinking in my family was that, especially on my father's side, they were all successful in their own way. They owned gas stations and all this other stuff. And so every time I was around them, there was a lot of laughter. And it's not like I wanted to pick up a drink, but it was like they were drinking, they were laughing, they were having fun. I wanted some of that. But I was also, I guess, a pleasure junkie from that high, you know, whether it was sugar or television or whatever it was. And my first drink was around, I guess I was 14, and there was a kind of a separation building inside. So the self-centered, fearful alcoholic was in potential at that time. And I didn't realize I wasn't going to learn about the whole selfishness thing until I got into the step work. But anyway, I took my first drink, it was Colt 45. I was with these guys, we were going to a dance, and they said, oh, it's going to be so much better when we drink a case of Colt 45, you know, and I'm hearing all these voices in my head saying, yeah, I want to be with the guys, you know, and the quiet voice way back there was going, don't do it, please don't do that, don't drink, and I ignored that voice, you know. So I started drinking in high school, or whatever, junior high school. I started drinking. And at the time, it was just like maybe on a Saturday night. But as I look back, my decision making with regard to people, places, and things began to shift very slowly, but it began to shift. My grades dropped. I had a real potential for sports, and because my grades dropped, my dad said, you don't pick the grades up, no football, you know, was coming fall. And I said, okay, you know, that's fine. And I just, more and more, it was more and more about having a party, more about how can I find pleasure here, there, and everywhere else. And that went on through high school till I really barely got out of high school. And a lot of rebellion was starting to take place too, because I was like, I didn't want to be in school, I don't want to be a part of this or anything like it. Well, this was in the 60s, so I got out of high school in 67. I started working in a record store, had a girlfriend, I was drinking beer, playing pool. I mean, life was great. And then I got this letter that said, you know, and it wasn't from Ron. Anyway, I got this letter that said, you know, welcome to the U.S. Army. So I go in the Army, and that's summer of 68, and March of 69, I'm in Vietnam. Life-changing event, for sure. And I mention that for a couple of reasons. And I'll tie them into AA, as you'll see. One was that there wasn't much structure in my growing up years. Just never knew where the boundaries were, never knew when you know, I could do things or not do things, never knew when the thumb of discipline was going to be on my sister and I, or when it wasn't there at all. The Army was a structure that I did not want to go into. I tried to think, how can I get out of this? I don't want to go to Canada. I'm not sick, you know. I was not conscious of any of that stuff. But my dad was a World War II guy, and there was some of that was like, you know, I can't just, there's no other way to get out of this, I'm going to do it. So I did it, I stepped into it, and I stepped into a structure that was called the U.S. Army, or the military. And to my surprise, I found myself thriving in this structure. You know, I had a structure that was really clear-cut, and I found excellence and freedom in it, which really surprised me, because that wasn't my story up until that point. Now I go fast forward. I go to Vietnam, and a lot of what happened there was pretty scary. Needless to say, it's an underestimated thing. Anyway, that was very daunting, very scary. But at the same time, I was willing to take responsibility. So I didn't drink. I hardly drank at all over there. Smoked grass once in a while, and but I had a lot of. I was made a sergeant, and I had 9-10 months in the Army, and so I had responsibility, and I had responsibility for men's lives. So I took that very seriously. Part of me was that, and this is maybe a childhood thing, was I used to have to take care of my dad when he got drunk, growing up. Sometimes I wouldn't go to school, so I could keep him awake while he was driving to go see his customers and stuff like that. So the little sergeant became the bigger sergeant. Anyway, I ended up, I came home from Vietnam in March of '70, and I daily drank. I started the daily drink. And I was shocked at my own reaction to how I was, because no one told me at the time. I would learn this much later. No one told me that I was going to be forever changed, that that's what happened. I came back and I thought I could have what I left, and I could not. So I ended up drinking every day. I wrecked my car, I wrecked my dad's car. I was like out of control. And I still had a few more months to do in the Army, which was in New Jersey, which was too weird for words to I'm home and I got to put a uniform on and go be a soldier in the States, which was a very different reality. As that progressed in time over the next few months, next almost a year, more and more X-rated people were coming into my life, and I was really heading down a lane of homicide, suicide. I didn't understand my own rage. It really started to scare me. Didn't know how to process what I'd just been through the year before, and I was drinking every day. So we get to 71, and I thought, you know what? Maybe I'll try college, see what happens. So, but I was told I wasn't college material. But I had this evidence from the service where I could do well. I could perform excellently when called upon. And so I had a reading problem growing up, which I would realize was a much bigger ball and chain than I imagined. So I got one of the angels among us was this guy who was a teacher at Bucks County Community College. And he had a special reading program for like 0 credits, but he was like, what's her name, Helen Keller, like when she learns that language, like that was me. I literally learned how to read. I mean, I could read, but I couldn't, I would be bored after 1 page of anything. So he sat me down and said, I took a test. He said, do you know what your reading level is? I said, I know it's bad, that's why I'm here. He said, no, it's 4th grade. He said, we're going to change that. And he did. And so I took my work ethic and that structure that I thrived in the service, and I put it to college. And now that I could read like a normal person, I started to thrive in that. And the drinking subsided. And the bad thinking, the bad ideas of homicide and suicide started to go away. So I go through a couple years of college at Bucks, and I'm doing well, and I go to Rider University, where I get my degree in '75. And I even did a part of that year at Princeton for a special program that was happening at the time with my field. So I ended up moving to New York in the fall of '75. And now, I don't know anybody in New York. I mean, my uncle was there, but I don't have a community in New York. I don't have a structure. So I start drinking again. Now I drank through college, but it was beers at midterms and finals and stuff like that, but it wasn't anything like it was before college or after Vietnam. But here I was sliding back into that kind of behavior, and also here come the X-rated people. So I start, I'm drinking, and now for about, this is like maybe 77, 78, all of a sudden I start having nightmares about the war. And I'm really out of control with drinking, and really screwing up relationships, especially with women. Oh my God, it was really messy. But anyway, here comes the next angel, psychoanalyst who had been in the Marines and also was a college professor. Those two things were very influential for me. So I start working with this guy, and we start sorting out things with family and sorting out things with the military. But the very first session, he says to me, "Have you been drinking?" I said, "No." And he said, I think you have. I can smell something. I said, okay. I had some Budweisers and a couple of Zambucas with lunch, but that's not really drinking. And he said, no, that's drinking. So I said, I tell you what, here's what I did the other night. Now, you tell me. So I told him what I was doing the other night, which I thought that was drinking. Anyway, he said, "I'm not going to work with you unless you go to AA." This was in '78, and I thought, AA, I was a bartender then, so I was like, what are you telling me AA for? I'm whatever. Anyway, I ended up telling him and convincing him that he could work with me, and that, like what happened in college, we'll start solving my problems and I won't be drinking. You'll see. And so he took a chance with me on that. Now, he was not in a 12-step program, so he had knowledge of it, but he didn't have firsthand knowledge of it. But needless to say, I did well with this guy. This went on for a couple years. Then I started working in my field, which is the entertainment field. And so I started working and getting work, and I got out of the bar business. And then a couple years later, I started having some success. Well, I got into a show in New York, and it was a hit. And all of a sudden, I'm sliding back into daily drinking. Just like that. I thought, wait a minute, this is all good. What am I doing? I'm drinking every day. Now, I wouldn't drink before a show, which I thought was admirable, whatever, but I'd get loaded afterwards, like every night. And we were off on Monday, so I thought, oh, Monday, I'm not going to drink on Monday. Monday would come, and there'd be some reason, and I'd pick up and I would drink. This went on for about a year. And then I said to my wife at the time, we were going to take this thing to London. And I said, I'm going to quit. I know it's a problem. I recognize that. And she was like, yeah, thank you. So we go to London and I quit. Now I'm detoxing with no booze and no program. And this is when I started, you can ruin your life without drinking and without a program. And as a dry drunk, as an untreated alcoholic, without booze, without any kind of spirituality, without a community, boom, doom time. And I ruined a lot of things. Since the next couple of years, the reason I mentioned one day at a time earlier is that I was trying to quit forever. I'm never going to drink again, ever, never, Well, that'd be 3-4 months, and then it would be like all of a sudden, either I'd plan it, like I think I'm going to have a drink next week, or I'm going to, anyway, I ended up, or sometimes I'd have a drink in my hand at a party and I'd go, God, how'd that happen? Because I had no defense against the first drink. I was white knuckling it. I was muscling it. I thought it was me. It was all about me. Anyway, that went on for a couple of years, as I say. And then in 1987, where I went to my first AA meeting, I'd been working in Canada with this guy from California, and he was in AA. And I lied to him. He said, you don't drink? I said, no. He goes, you a friend of Bill's? And I started to catch the lingo. I said, no, you are, right? He goes, yeah. I said, and I lied. I said, I've been to AA meetings, and they're not for me. And he said, oh, okay, But he would still talk to me like I was in the program. Anyway, so he meets me in New York, and we're going to go have some dinner, and he said, pick me up at this place, the 79th Street Workshop, which is an AA clubhouse up there. And I'm thinking I'm picking him up after a meeting. So I get there, and he walks me in. I said, wait, where are we going? He says, we're going to the meeting. I said, I thought you went to the meeting, aren't we? He said, we're going to go now, but you've been to AA meetings, right? And I lied again. I said, yeah. So I go to my first AA meeting. I'm sitting there freaking out, because it's a room like this, it's like a million people in my eyes. I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do here? And I'm sitting there pretending I know what what it's about. And then I was like, God, they let everybody in, And then I saw the speaker put $1 into the basket, and I thought, the speaker has to pay to be at the meeting? Whatever. This is cuckoo here thinking. Anyway, I got through that meeting, and I don't remember anything about it except that there were people who seemed somewhat confident, somewhat relaxed within themselves. They didn't look like they wanted to drink. I don't know if they did or not, but to me, at that time, that's how it appeared. Now, I went another year till November of '88, and at that time, I had a really incredible opportunity present itself on November 11th, which is Veterans Day, which I was not even conscious of at the time. I would realize that later. But I went to that night, so the meeting was on the next morning with these producers, and it was a big deal. Everybody was excited. And that night, my friend Larry calls me up. He goes, hey, I'm in the village. You want to come out and have a drink? And I said, Larry. And he goes, oh, that's right. I'm sorry. You don't drink. Well, never mind. Forget it. I said, no, I'll meet you. I said, I'll just have some coffee or something. So I get out there to meet him at this bar. And I sat down and I went, oh, you know what? Give me a Jack Daniels. So I'm just going to have one, So I have one, and then I have two, and then I'm off and running. And then somebody put a couple of lines down, and then more drinks. Now it's 3:34 in the morning, and my appointment's at 9:30, 10 o'clock, right? So I'm wired and I'm drunk. And I go back to our apartment, and I couldn't sleep. I was in bed like this, and so I get up at like 8 o'clock, and I'm taking cold showers and hot showers, and I'm trying to drink coffee and get normal and everything. It's like, no, that wasn't going to happen. So when I go in to show up for this meeting, it was a disaster, because I was like that guy in Men in Black, when he's got all the bugs in him and he's talking like this. Oh my God, I was in trouble. And I could see it on their faces. The bubbles over their heads were like, how do we get this guy out of here? And I'm telling you, and I knew it too. I was embarrassed in the moment. I left, and I thought, oh my God. And I remembered this guy who'd been asking me if I wanted to go to meetings over the last year or two. And so I went to a meeting with him 2 days later. And then I went to another meeting. And then I was starting to hear things, 90 and 90 and all this stuff. And on November 19th, 1988, I'm walking across Greenwich Village to go to this meeting. And those voices I described to you about the Colt 45 and the one way in the back, they traded places. And the loud, rational, alcoholic voices kind of collapsed on each other. And the only thing left that I could hear was, give this thing a shot. Ask them about the 90-90 thing, whatever that is. So I go in, and I said to my friend, I said, I want to do the 90-90 thing. He goes, oh yes, 90 meetings in 90 days. I said, what? 90 meetings in 90 days, jeez. So anyway, I commit myself to that. I also met my first sponsor at that meeting. And sponsorship is a huge, huge part of my recovery. I am so grateful that I'm accountable to someone. And I have people who are accountable to me. Sponsorship also helped me to see other ways into higher power, or God as I choose to call my higher power. All of that came into play. Now, so I start working with my first sponsor, Denny, and he talked about God a lot, but we really weren't doing any step work, and this is the pathway. These 12 steps is the way out. It's interesting because our founders, they were considering calling the book Alcoholics Anonymous. They were going to call it A Way Out, right? So we'd be called Way Outs or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, I started working with Denny for, it's a couple years, I think. And then in sobriety and in recovery, I was going to meetings. I was doing service. I had real issues with the higher power stuff. So I really wasn't cultivating a relationship with an inner source, or an inner resource in here. So I started to have a program where personalities were getting in front of principals. So I started judging the meetings a little bit, like, I don't know if I like that meeting. I think I'll go late today, you know. And I could feel it, I could feel the sloth dropping into whatever kind of program I thought I had at the time. So then I start noticing this guy who, I actually noticed him when I was first around. And he was one of those guys that was just a little too clear. He could quote the big book. He had all of these experiences that were sober experiences. He had a great life. You know, he enjoyed himself. He laughed a lot, and he annoyed me. And well, this guy started to really become important. And I remember after a couple meetings, he said to me, "Brian, what step are you on?" And I was embarrassed. I said, "Well, you know, they're all important." He said, no. What step are you on now, today? I said, "I'm not on a step." And he said, "That's your problem." So I knew I had to work with this guy. And Denny, my previous sponsor, he was totally cool with it. You know, he said, "No, it's just go work with Bruce." So I started working with this guy, Bruce, who was my second sponsor. And the first thing he did when we sat down, because here we are, and like he's taking me into a deeper structure, which is what AA has a structure. And the more you adhere to it, the more freedom you're going to find. That's been my experience. So Bruce says to me, "Okay, first thing you got to know is I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to save your life," which was really hard to hear. And I said, "Okay." But I was at a new bottom, you know. I was at a spiritual bottom. I really understood for the first time that I had a spiritual malady. And he said to me, "We're going to work the steps through the big book. You're going to meet me every week. You call me, blah, blah, blah." You know, he had all these things, all these rules. He said, "If you can't agree to this, it's okay." He says, "Get somebody else." I said, No, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. I'll do anything." So we started working together. And at that time, so this is really interesting, because in step one, like when I was first around, the language of recovery, the vocabulary that we have was really kind of like it fell off of me. I'd hear people talk about powerlessness or, you know, God of our understanding, all that stuff. It just kind of would go here and fall away. Now, I'm grateful that I didn't pick up a drink or anything like that in that time. So when we got to step one, I started to create a little shorthand for myself. And I'll take you through that with me. Step one is an honesty step. I still learn from step one. You know, I'm really clear about my formal surrender on November 19th, but I'm also clear about the daily surrender and the surrenders that come in between that are necessary for me to just steer through life. And that honesty in step one, there's a natural drift that can take us, or took me, into step two. And step two is where is a step about faith. Because I really didn't think about even, did I have a faith, or what was it, or anything like that. In fact, I had a little bit, I've dug my heels in a little bit in step two, and I said to my sponsor, I said, I don't get it, higher power, you know, it's like, and he did the group of drunks thing. He said, "Oh, you know, God, G.O.D., a group of drunks, whatever you want it to be." And so he said to me, "Between now and next week, I want you to write an evidence list." I said, "An evidence list? What do you mean?" He says, "I want you to write an evidence list of everything that smacks of truth, beauty, or goodness that you know in the world, yours." I said, "Okay." So I make this list of mountains and nature, sunsets, sunrises, children, laughter, music, and I present this to him the next week. And he just asked me one question. He said, "Do you think there might be something behind this?" I was like, "Yeah, I do. I didn't have to even think about it." And he said, "Good." So we went on to step three. Now, step three with him was really fascinating because we got to it, and I guess one of the things I brought to AA was I brought a lot of skepticism and a lot of arrogance. So every step along the way, that kind of thinking would start to get in the way. Well, we get to step 3 and we're in the big book, and he says, you see the prayer there? 3rd step prayer? I said, yes. He said, you see what it says underneath it? I said, yes. He says, it says, we thought well before we took this step. He says, so I want you to think about this between now and next week when we meet. And he said, if you want to, we'll do this 3rd step prayer together. But he said, do you want to go to the river? Do you want to go into a church? I said, the diner's fine. We'll do it right here in the diner. And he said, okay. So I come back the next week. We mumbled the 3rd step prayer because there's other people around. And get through that. And he says, okay, now I want you to think about this over the next few days. And just tell me if anything comes to mind. So the next day, my friend had a really nice car downtown, and he asked me if I would move it for him to get it so his wife could get it. I said, sure, and it was a beautiful day. So I turn a car, he had a sunroof, moonroof, whatever it is. It was a beautiful sunny day, and I let the roof open it up, and all this light and air came in. I went, wow, maybe that's what's possible in my thinking. In terms of this 3rd step. Then the other thing was the next day, my daughter was an infant at the time. And so in the middle of the day, my job would be to try and get her to sleep. And she was a fighter for the first few minutes. And then after a while, she would fall asleep. Well, so this next day, I've got my daughter in my arms, and I'm rocking her, because you couldn't sit down with her, right? So I'm rocking her, and then she's fighting for a couple minutes, and then all of a sudden, she lets go. And in that moment, I went, oh my God, I think I'm being held too. And that really got to me in the best way. I started to feel this very subtle presence. I didn't have the thing that Bill Wilson had with a white light or any of that stuff. All of my spiritual experience has come vis-a-vis the educational kind, through experience and work with the 12 steps and other alcoholics. Anyway, so that was step 3. Now I get to step 4. So I talked about honesty as a step 1. Here comes step 4. Step 4 was going to be a greater call for honesty. So I was going to have these 3 inventories, one on resentments with the 4 columns, a fear inventory, and sexual behavior, sexual conduct. And I did them. And I put them all together. Or, I took them to my sponsor, whatever that was, 2 or 3 weeks later. And we sat down and we started to take it apart. And I was really surprised at how I was beginning to recognize my alcoholism in ways I'd never seen it before. I mean, if anything this stuff can do is put light on the blind spots. I had more blind spots than you can imagine. I was, as an untreated alcoholic, I was unconscious in some respects to life. Anyway, we went through that. As we were going through that, he says to me, Brian, he says, there's nothing here about your experience in Vietnam. I said, yeah, so? He goes, well, that was like the event of your life, right? I said, yeah, but I don't see how it applies to AA. He goes, no, you're wrong. He'd never been in service. He said, no, I disagree with you. He says, that's going to be another 4th step, and you need to bring that here, and we need to do a step 5 on it. So I do. And the thing that's really cool I want to mention about step 5, and I'm going to bounce back and forth a little bit. Step 5 was the first time I experienced forgiveness. And that was going to come up later when I was going to do work in 8 and 9, and even 11. But anyway, I'll get to that later. But with the forgiveness that came from the 5th step was, we did that work, and then as it suggests in the literature, we take an hour afterwards to reflect on the first 5 proposals, the first 5 steps. So I do that. I'm sitting and I'm thinking, gee, I wonder if I should write something anymore. And he'd said, no, you're done writing. Just do this, just reflect for an hour on this. But I did. I had a pad and a pen, and I wrote 1 sentence. I wrote, Dear God, I did the best I could. And I really had. As an untreated alcoholic, I had done the best I could with what I had. But now I have tools. I'm gathering tools to be in the world in a different way. Not just to stay away from drinking or anything like that, but to be in the world in a way that would really surprise me and the people around me. So, step 5. Now, I must say, one of the things that came up in step 5 was, in the 4th step, it asks about my part. Where was I selfish, self-seeking, fearful, dishonest? The dishonesty part was huge for me. It wasn't like clerical stuff, like I stole $5 or something like that. It was more of the emotional dishonesty. I didn't know how I felt sometimes. I would say yes to things I needed to say no to. I would say no to things I needed to say yes to. And so all of that really, really confused me and wreaked havoc on my character defects. And one of them had to do with anger, pride. There was a big connection between fear of authority from my fear inventory and authority figures in my life where I had resentments. I have a big one I'll share with you shortly. Anyway, with 6, I really understood 6 to be a step about grace. I thought entirely ready was I was going to make another decision like I did in step 3. Entirely ready was not that. It was this arrival, this convergence of the work I'd just done that allowed me to be closer to this inner resource, my higher power I choose to call God. And from there, we went right into 7, of course, and 7 is about character building and asking and humility. Now I get to step 8. Step 8, if 5 for me was about forgiveness and freedom, step 8 was about more forgiveness. So I would be able to interpret that I became willing to make amends to them all. The became willing was how I was going to incorporate forgiveness in terms of how to rectify some of these relationships that were incomplete or had been destroyed in some way. So I make this list, and I said to my sponsor, I said, okay, here we go. And we split the list up into 3 sections. The easy ones, the not easy ones, and the NFWs. Okay, so that's what we did. And so I started making amends. I started doing 9-step work gradually. And I was surprised that and I have to go back. When we first sat down with the big book, and we're looking at the preface and the forwards and everything, he says to me, this is going to be so exciting. I'm thinking, I read this book last year. I thought, what's he talking about? Well, I really believe that the big book and the literature is meant to bring us together. And I feel that way today. Anyway, so I started making 9-step amends. And some of them were easy. Some of them were not easy. And then the ones I thought I would never do started to look like they were possible. So after I get out there and start making some amends, there was this is going to sound silly. My last year of college, I didn't pay my parking tickets. Well, they were $2 a ticket, and the bill was $250. So that's how many tickets. And I'd leave them in the back seat so the security guys could see them. So I'm thinking, and plus they were always hitting me up for money, the alumni fund. And I would send them money, but I'd send it with a resentment. So I was talking to my sponsor about it. He goes, why don't you pay the parking tickets, and then you don't have to give them any more money if you don't want to. I was like, God, that's so smart. So I call up the school. This is in the 90s. I graduated in 75. I call up the school. I said, I'd like to pay my parking tickets. And they said, oh, we'll send you over to Student Life. So I talked to this guy. I said, he says, are you a student? I said, no. He says, oh, when were you here? I said, well, I was there in 74, 75. He said, and you want to pay your parking tickets now? He goes, I think it's a little late, you know? I said, no, really, I insist. This is something I need to do. And he said, he said, why don't you donate it to the alumni fund? I said, no. I've been doing that. I'm not doing that. I want to pay my parking tickets, and I want to be recognized as having paid my parking tickets. And he was like, okay, well, let me steer you over to Mrs. whatever her name was, and we'll see what we can work out, and we'll call you back. So she calls me back the next day, and she goes, oh, hi, yes, Brian, we have a way for you to pay your parking tickets. I said, oh, what's that? And she said, send it to the alumni fund. So anyway, so I did. Anyway, it's a small thing. Now, let me go the other way, which was I had some amends to make in Vietnam. And in one situation, Jim has heard this before. Let me be careful here. I was in a company, and the last part of my tour was nighttime perimeter patrols. I was a sergeant, and I had some crazy guys in my squad. But we also had a tyrannical commanding officer, and everybody I think hated this guy. So we come in off of the night before, what we were doing outside the perimeter the night before, and one of my guys, I see him take 2 grenades, and he says to this other guy, he goes, I'm gonna blow away the major. And I heard it, and I thought, I hope he gets him. I was like, okay, if that guy dies, yay. Well, so I don't know if it was the next night or whatever, he tries to kill the major. And I was responsible for all the ammo that we would take out each day and bring back the next morning. So the grenades are missing. I know they're missing. And so now I'm in trouble. The 2 guys that tried to kill the major did not kill him. They missed him. They almost killed a good friend of mine. It's too long a story to tell about that part. But anyway, I was furious, and I was going to shoot this guy that tried to kill the major. I was a mess. And so that guy goes to Leavenworth from Vietnam to do attempted murder charges. And they didn't have me where they wanted me technically. They wanted my non-commissioned officer status, but they would have to, if I said no to an Article 15, which was non-judicial punishment, then they would have to take me to a court-martial. And I got a lawyer, a military lawyer, and he said, we'll ask for the next higher-up court-martial. He said, if they don't have anything, nothing will happen. And truly nothing happened. But the major knew it was me, that I was responsible for the grenades. Fast forward, he was on the NFW list, right? Now, I've done about maybe 20 amends out of 40, whatever it was. And because there's more spirituality dropping in on this alcoholic, and I'm seeing what's possible with that, and I see relationships being healed, and I mean, the one thing about the 9th step, 8th and 9th step work is the beneficiary of it is me. If you do this work, it's you. You know, I mean, I remember putting my name up on the top of the amends list, and because I heard somebody did that, and my sponsor said, no. He says, when you get through all this, if you think you need to put your name up there, then put it up there. Anyway, I'm so grateful that he did that, because I didn't realize what was coming in terms of the benefits I would receive from doing this part of the work. So now I find the major out in Utah, right? Now this is before the internet, before the technology took over like it has in the last 20 years. So I find him, and I put a call in to see if it's him, and I knew his name because when I was his armorer and / supply sergeant, I used to forge his signature, so I knew his name. Anyway, so I call him up, and I get an answering machine, and I'm sitting at my desk in New York, and my legs are like this, and I went, geez, maybe I'm not really ready for this. So the answering machine comes on, and it's his voice, unmistakably. But I didn't want to leave a message. I didn't know how I was going to start the conversation on the voice machine. So I called him back the next day. He answers the phone. I said, Mr. Yes? This is Brian Dell. I was in your company in July 1969. And he said, I'm sorry, son, I don't, there's a lot of guys I don't remember. I said, I was the one who got the grenades. And he said, what do you want? Boom, he was like pretty quick about that. And I said, I'm making contact with you because in hindsight, upon reflection, I can see that I behaved selfishly and fearfully. And I am contacting you because I feel whatever harm I may have caused you, I would like to rectify at this time. Silence. And he says, okay. And I said, I'm also calling to implore your forgiveness. And he said, yeah, all right. He says, was there any harm I caused you? You don't go there, right? So I said, well, I'm just trying to take care of my side of things. And he said, okay, what are you doing with your life? And I told him, I live in New York, we have a baby, work in the entertainment business, etc. And I said, what about yourself, sir? Because he was older. If I was 19, 20, he was 40, 41, 42. So he was older. And he told me what he did with the rest of his time in the military, and he also explained what he did a little bit in civilian life. And then he says, well, if there was any harm I caused you, I hope you can forgive me. I said, yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. And he said, look, if you're ever out here, come by, we'll have a cup of coffee. I said, thank you, sir. I hung up the phone. I couldn't move for 20 minutes because what had just taken place was unthinkable for this recovering alcoholic, for a human being. This was me using these tools, higher power, the wisdom and the guidance of a sponsor that allowed me to do this and to experience a healing that I never thought was possible. So the ninth step, and I could go on all night about the incredible experiences from the ninth step. I'll give you one more that's a little lighter, I think. I'm about 2/3 of the way through my 8th step list. I'm like mowing them down, you know. And but what came to mind, there were a couple names that came to mind in the middle of that work going, oh, you know what, I think I may have harmed that person or this person, and I'd write it down. And he was very good about like making sure I wasn't writing down names of people that I annoyed. He said, look, there's a big difference between people you annoyed and people you harmed. I said, oh, okay. Anyway, there was this, when I was in kindergarten, there was this kid that I didn't like him. You know, I didn't like his voice, and you know, you name it, I didn't like him. And so we're leaving kindergarten to go home, and we're playing like airplanes, so we're going with our arms out and our fists like this, and I came by and I clock him, knock him, and I didn't even look back. So the next day at school, the teacher, Miss O'Reilly, says, Brian is a bully, and he hurt Billy. And Billy had to go to the doctor because he bled on his coat and everything. And Billy's not here today because Billy's now been sent to Catholic school because of Brian. And I was like, oh my God, I feel terrible. And she's like, now, have you told your parents? I said, no. Well, you're going to tell them today, right? I said, yes. No, I didn't tell my parents. So I was like this for about a month, and then of course there was a parent-teachers conference, and the teacher told my mother, and it was like, she was horrified and everything. Anyway, so here we are, fast forward to the 90s, and I'm running this by my sponsor, and he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I don't even know if the guy's still alive, or I don't know where he is, and you know, again, there's no internet, there's no Google or anything like that. So I said, well, I want to try and find him. I want to see if I can find him and make amends. And he said, go to it. So I called up the neighborhood we lived in at the time, and his last name was Murphy, so there's a lot of Murphys. It's like Smith or Jones, right? But I found this on this street. I remembered that street. And I called up the house, and I said, hello, is this Mr. Murphy? And he said, yes. I said, you're not Billy Murphy, are you? And he said, no, you mean William? He lives over somewhere, in Salem or something like that. I said, is there any way I could contact him? He said, yeah, sure. He gives me the number. So I call him up. I said, William? And he said, yes. I said, did you go to Penn Valley Elementary School back in the 50s? He said, yes, I did. I said, did you have Miss O'Reilly as your teacher? And he said, yeah, who is this? I said, well, I was in that class with you. I'm the guy that hit you that day and sent you to Catholic school. And he said, he says, I don't know if I really remember this. I said, well, I remember it very vividly, and it's weighed on my conscience all this time, and I'm making contact because even if you don't remember, I hope you can forgive me. And he said, yeah, man, forgiven and forgotten. Jeez. He says, by the way, he says, my brothers and sisters went to Catholic school. I hope you don't think you sent them to Catholic school. So we moved on. So anyway, so that's like just a little couple pictures in the 8 and 9 work that came on top of this other work, 1 through 7. So 10, 11, and 12 are about God consciousness. And one of the things that put a ripple into my program was on 9/11. I was living, as I mentioned before, I was living in the village, but I was downtown on 9/11, and I was outside with this old nun who I knew from AA actually. And the first plane flew over our heads and hit the North Tower. And needless to say, it was a major shock. And that day and the days following, I started sinking back into where I was. I was like my program collapsed, which I never thought was possible. Because I thought I have everything in place. Sponsorship, I pray, I meditate, I do work, I do service, and it was collapsing. And it was literally scaring me. So I have to reinvest in AA all over again. But this time, I started getting involved with the veterans community. And I needed to do that. I also started to do work in my chosen field that was related to suicide, combat, and the solution that can come with restoring veterans. Kind of the way we get restored. I take a lot of what we do here into that world. What I never imagined was I would go back to Vietnam and visit, which I ended up doing in 2012 and 13. In 2013, I took a play I do about combat, suicide, and restoration to Hanoi, and I did it there for 2 nights. I even went to meetings in Vietnam, which was a shock. When I first went in 2012, I remember I Googled up AA meetings in Vietnam, and these meetings came up. Because I was still hardwired, even with all the recovery work and all the spiritual insights, I was still hardwired. So when I went to Vietnam, I went to meetings in Vietnam. I was like, wow. I went to one meeting where, in this town called Hoi An, and there was a guy there, one guy in the town of 1 million, who was the contact guy to go to a meeting. Now, they don't really have churches over there you can go to, so people have meetings in their houses or in cafes. So I called this guy up and I said, you have the AA meetings. I see they're on Fridays and Mondays, and it was a Saturday. I said, so you have a meeting come Monday, right? He said, yeah. He says, that's great. I'm so glad you gonna come? I said, yeah, I'm gonna come. He said, oh, great. He says, so we'll see you Monday. I said, wait. I said, it doesn't say what time. And he said, what time would you like it to be? So I said, 7 o'clock. He said, great, see you then. So I went to AA meetings in Vietnam. Now this is interesting because this is like a little bit of step 11 to talk about, as well as 9. And that is, I went to the area of operation where I spent quite a few months of my time there as a soldier. And I found this one little area where we used to go into the South China Sea to swim. And a lot happened in that area. A lot of people got hurt around there too, both sides. So I was with my Vietnamese people that I was working with that day, who had driven me down. I flew down from Hanoi to Da Nang, and then I got a van with this Vietnamese guy and a translator and a camera guy, and we went down to Chu Lai. And we spent, I think we were there about an hour, and I knew I had to do something. So I said, guys, I need to step away. And I went over, and I got on my knees, and I just got quiet, as still as I could be. And the voice, if you could call it that, they say you go to certain battlefields, you can feel the energy of what had happened there. Well, I felt it because I had been there. And it was, if you will, the voice that came through that I was allowed to hear was the voices of the guys who didn't get back, who said, we're okay, and so are you. That started to transform my perception of the people there I was still hardwired in many ways about who they were, how they tried to kill us, how we had to try and kill them. All that stuff was, and it started to loosen up the hardwiring. And I started to see that the thing, what is spoken about in the literature about the divine component being in every man, woman, and child. And I started to see it in them. And then also the people I was with, we had a guide who was a Buddhist and had been on the South Vietnamese side, which is the side we fought with. And he showed us the rituals in terms of how to behave in a pagoda. And there was just something to that. I have a 360-degree net on my spirituality, so I'm very curious about what people believe, where they put their faith. I feel like I can learn something, because I had, like I said before, I had a total, I was repulsed by it, to put it mildly. Now I want to start to close things up, but I must say that one of the things that came out of this work and the work in the veterans community was this notion of practicing these principles in all my affairs. AA seems to be with me everywhere I go. Even, and like I say, I travel with, I've been to meetings in Europe and Central America and all around the country, and I'm still impressed with what we're capable of, and what we can do, you know? And the whole idea, I mean, part of the reason I love meetings too is that, and sponsorship, is that there's this notion of witnessing. I didn't realize how important that was going to be to me, because I really had the sick as your secrets thing going on for a long time, and I had an area that was very protected. Nobody was going to get to it, you know. And but I've been disarmed in the best absolute possible way because of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. So last August, my daughter, who's going to come out to California where I am and go to graduate school, we lost her mom to long-term cancer. She got it 3 times in the 90s with breast cancer, then she got ovarian cancer in 2010, and in 2013, 15, and she put on a good fight. She did die sober. And I have to say that I hope I can say this with some kind of humility. I do believe that God makes anything possible, but I also believe that AA makes anything possible, and they're really one and the same in this alcoholic's mind. Thank you again, Ron, and it's been a privilege to be here with you tonight. Thank you so much.
Wow, that was epic. Thank you, Brian. Thank you one more time again. Our speakers travel long and far at their own expense just for each and every one of us here tonight, and it's kind of important that we form a line and thank them for their service, coming out and sharing their time and their experience with us. Again, an awesome job. Don't forget, next week we will be here at 10 a.m. Actually, we'll need a lot of help if anybody feels like volunteering. See us after the meeting. We got a nice way of closing. Thanks for coming out, and let's form a circle and close it up.